Did you know that just before the Titanic started its journey from Southampton, a strange woman stood on the dock and screamed at the passengers to stop? She told them the ship would sink. The crowd laughed at her. Wealthy men in top hats waved her off. Children pointed. She was shaking, she was crying, and nobody listened. That woman was not a fortune teller. She was not a mystic. She was a survivor of another disaster who recognized something the rest of the world refused to see. Her name was Anne Elizabeth Isham, and her story is the part of the Titanic nobody talks about. You have heard the Titanic story 100 times. The unsinkable ship, the iceberg, the band playing as the deck tilted into the black Atlantic. But here is what you have never been told. The Titanic was not a tragedy of bad luck. It was a tragedy of ignored warnings, and Anne Isham was only one of many voices that went unheard. Anne was 40 years old in 1912. She was the daughter of a wealthy Chicago lawyer. She had spent years living in Europe. She was intelligent. She was well-traveled. She was not a woman who panicked easily. In January of that same year, Anne had been a passenger on another White Star Line ship, the RMS Olympic. That ship had collided with a British naval vessel in the harbor at Southampton. The damage was severe. The hull was torn open. Anne stood on the deck and watched water pour into the lower compartments. She felt the ship list. She heard the screams of other passengers. She survived, but something in her changed. When she booked passage on the Titanic months later, she did not feel excitement. She felt dread. She studied the ship's design. She learned that the Titanic and the Olympic were nearly identical. She learned that the Titanic's watertight compartments were a lie. They did not seal at the top. Water could spill from one compartment into the next. Anne understood this. She had seen it before. And when she arrived at the dock in Southampton on April 10, 1912, she could not stay silent. She stood at the edge of the crowd as passengers boarded. She shouted that the ship was unsafe. She referenced the Olympic collision. She begged people to get off. A reporter from the London Evening Standard noted the incident but dismissed her as a hysterical woman. The crowd laughed. Men in first-class suits told her to calm down. Security moved her away. She was not arrested. She was not listened to. She was simply erased from the moment. Here is where the story becomes darker. Anne was not the only warning. The Titanic received at least 6 ice warnings on the day of the disaster. Other ships radioed in. Captain Edward Smith knew. Bruce Ismay, the White Star Line chairman who was aboard, knew. The lookouts knew. But the ship maintained full speed. Why? Because the Titanic was not just a ship. It was a statement. It was the largest moving object ever built by human hands. Slowing down would have admitted weakness, and in 1912, weakness was unacceptable. The ship struck the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. on April 14th. Anne Isham was in her first-class cabin on C deck. She had been unable to sleep. Survivors later reported seeing her in the hallway, fully dressed, hours before the collision. She knew. She had known all along. When the ship began to sink, Anne did not panic. She helped other passengers find life jackets. She guided a young mother and her child toward a lifeboat. She refused to board herself. She gave her seat to another woman. She stayed behind. Her body was never recovered. The cold North Atlantic took her. But here is the part that should haunt you. After the disaster, the White Star Line held hearings. They controlled the narrative. They blamed the iceberg. They blamed the speed. They blamed the lack of binoculars for the lookouts. They never mentioned Anne Isham. They never mentioned the woman who screamed on the dock. They never mentioned that a survivor of their own earlier disaster had begged them to stop. Because admitting that would have meant admitting that the tragedy was preventable. And preventable tragedies are the most expensive kind.
You think this is ancient history. You think you live in a different world. But you do not. In 1986, engineer Roger Boisjoli warned NASA that the O-rings on the Challenger shuttle would fail in cold weather. He wrote a memo. He begged them to delay the launch. They launched anyway. 7 people died. In 2019, Boeing engineers warned that the 737 MAX software was unstable. They were overruled.
346 people died. In 2021, residents of a Florida condominium warned that the building was structurally unsound. Inspectors delayed. The building collapsed. 98 people died. The pattern never changes. The warning is given. The warning is ignored. The disaster happens. The inquiry finds that the disaster was a tragedy of unforeseen circumstances. The person who warned is forgotten. Or worse, they are called hysterical. They are called alarmist. They are called a strange woman on a dock. Anne Isham was not psychic. She was not irrational. She was a human being who had survived a traumatic event and recognized the same conditions repeating. Her brain had encoded the danger, the tilt of a deck, the sound of tearing metal, the smell of salt water where it should not be. When she saw the Titanic, she did not see grandeur. She saw the Olympic. She saw the collision. She saw the water rushing in, and her body remembered what her mind could not ignore. This is called predictive processing. Your brain is constantly comparing the present to the past. When the match is too close, you feel dread before you can explain why. Anne felt it. She acted on it, and she was punished for being right. The Titanic carried 2,224 people. It sank in under 3 hours. 1,517 died. The ship had lifeboats for only half that number. The designers had decided that the ship was unsinkable, so lifeboats were decorative. Bruce Ismay survived by jumping into a lifeboat. Anne Isham did not. The chairman who ignored the warnings lived. The woman who gave the warning died. You will hear people say that the Titanic was a lesson in hubris, that it taught us to respect the ocean, that it changed maritime law, but it did not change us. We still build unsinkable ships. We still silence the strange voices on the dock. We still call them hysterical when they scream what we do not want to hear. So the next time someone stands up in a meeting and says this is unsafe, listen. The next time a resident says the building is cracking, investigate. The next time a woman screams on a dock that the ship will sink, do not laugh. She may have seen something you have not. She may have survived something you are about to endure. She may be the only person in the room who is not lying to herself. Anne Elizabeth Isham was 40 years old. She was wealthy. She was educated. She was sane. And she was right. She stood on the dock at Southampton, and she told the truth. The crowd laughed. The band played. The ship sailed, and the truth went down with her into the black water, where it remains to this day.